What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we are going to try to get this engine started up on the frame. Now I haven't gotten the coolant lines ran yet, so this is really just going to be kind of an initial startup, make sure everything's fine before I work further on the cooling lines. So we'll be able to run it for a little bit, but not too much, don't want it to get overheated. But there's a few things we got to do first before we get around to that. So previously I went ahead and dropped the pan out after running this on a stand for a little bit, after I had done some work on the engine and cleaned some stuff up. So I wanted to run kind of a starting oil just to flush everything out. We got that flush done. I was checking the pan. It looks like we're all good in the pan. It kind of cleaned out the engine a little bit. Just some of the carbon buildup was mixed in with the oil. So a few things we need to do before then. We need to get the oil pan cleaned up and ready for a new gasket. Go ahead and put that pan on, tighten it up, fill up the engine with some new oil. Also go ahead and fill up the transmission with oil as well, the transfer case. I will also go ahead and probably prep the cooler for the transmission. That way whenever I connect it and fill up the transmission, I know how much fluid is going in the transmission, because that extra is going to be going into that cooler. So we'll get to that. I need to go ahead and put the torque converter bolts on there. Yes, I still have not done that yet. So we're gonna get that done as well. Rehook the starter up. We are currently charging a battery up for this. I will be running 2 batteries in the truck, but right now I only need 1. I also need to go ahead and hook up the other part of the wiring harness as well, and go ahead and hook up the monitor that I have. That way I can monitor the engine output readings as well on everything, temperatures, everything like that. I am also able to read the injector balance rates on it. I did end up having to replace 1 injector on this. Now when you're replacing these injectors, usually if it's more than 1, you want to go ahead and replace all of them. I replaced the 1, retested everything on it, and they're actually in balance, so I should be still good on that, hopefully. We'll see if I need to run any injector cleaner on it before I kind of wrap everything up again, but I've been using a little bit of an additive in all the fuel just to help clean everything out as I'm going here. So I'm going to stop talking now, and we're going to get to finishing up some of this stuff that I need before we can get this thing started. So hopefully we get this thing started by the end of the day, and y'all let me know how it sounds. Alright, so we got the lower oil pan back on, we got the engine filled up. So the last time that we put this lower oil pan on here, we used this Permatex, the right stuff, the black. This stuff worked really well whenever it was on there. It is kind of a pain to clean up if you have to drop the pan on it at all, but it was doable and you could use it again. Now I did see that Felpro makes a gasket that basically just lays up there, that's a like multi-material type gasket. So I'm going to give them a shot on this. Some people say it's not worth it, that you're likely to get leaks, and just to go with this stuff, but I'll give it a shot. If it does leak, I'll let y'all know, because I'll be dropping the pan again to put this stuff on. Oh, and I shot a little bit of this on the other side, but I went ahead and got on the intercooler boots that I'm going to use and the actual clamps. The clamps are from Mishimoto. The intercooler boots, I believe, are kind of a mix from Mishimoto and also KB Diesel over there. That's actually just made to fit up to that turbo housing. to a 3-inch. So I went ahead and got that. I did go ahead and weld on our map sensor bung on here as well. I went ahead and connected that. All right, so a trick whenever welding on these types of bungs on here is to go ahead and drill out the tubing to approximately the same size hole that's in the bung itself. Find a bolt that actually has a shaft that's about the same diameter. That way you can slide it through and it'll hold the bung in place right on top of that hole. That way everything will line up even after you're done. Then just kind of tack around it and then go ahead and weld everything up. Also, before startup, one of the last things that I want to do is actually go ahead and prime the turbo with some oil as well. I'll go ahead and take this fitting off, try to put some oil down in this line and fill that up. And then also I'll go ahead and pour a little bit of oil down the turbo as well, just to pre-oil the turbo so it's not dry on initial startup. So next on my list is to go ahead and fill up the transmission with some fluid. Now when doing this, I'm going to go ahead and actually take the transmission cooler lines off and actually prime these lines. I'll put a funnel in one of them and basically fill it up until it's trying to come out the other. I'll then go ahead and connect it back to the transmission. That way I know that this amount of fluid is in there, and then I can go with the factory amount that is supposed to be in the transmission itself. That way I know that I have the right amount in there during this startup. And once I get the transmission filled up there, that still isn't the end of the things that we need to do. I need to get in there and actually put the torque converter bolts back in. I wanted to go ahead and put the fluid in the engine and the transmission before I really rotate everything around. Once I do that, we'll put the starter back on, and then we have a lot of wire connections to start hooking up. Alright, that's going to do it for today. Now, I didn't get everything done when you get it started today, but I do have some time tomorrow to work on this. So, I still need to basically hook the starter back up, get the electrical connections done, go ahead and hook up the fuel pump to what I already have on the electrical system. Go ahead and hook everything back up to the batteries, hook up the monitor, and we should be good to start. Alright guys, it's the next day. I went ahead and put that starter back on there. Kind of started to wire things up. Let me show you what we got. So I went ahead and hooked in the fuel pump into our connections here for the battery. That's what's going to provide the power to the fuel pump. So we also have this little fuse splitter here for the fuel pump. That'll go into our ignition fuse box there. So when the ignition's turned on, it'll flip this little relay here and provide full power to our fuel pump there. So the main power to the starter is hooked up. Our ground is hooked up to the side of the block as well. Now I still need to connect the little wire from the actual ignition switch. And all of that wiring is in this bundle right here. So we do have a CTS2 monitor. That's what I'm going to use to monitor the temps and everything on the engine. I have used this already. We do have, of course, the accelerator pedal, the ECM, TCM there, and a bunch of all wires just kind of laid out here. But I'm going to get to this and then I'll get back with y'all whenever I have it hooked up. And about that time, it should be basically ready to start. Alright guys, we now have all of the electrical harness hooked up. We have the ECM and TCM hooked up to the engine. We also have the map sensor up there. The alternator's plugged in as well. The ground wire is actually plugged into the side of the block down there. I have the accelerator pedal plugged in as well. This is our OBD2 port. I already have the HDMI hooked up for our monitor. This is a standalone system from Duramax Swap. I have a cheap ignition switch here. That'll help us just be able to flip the switch to run and the starter and everything. And of course, you probably know what that is. And if you don't, I'm not going to tell you. Well, there we go, guys. First startup on the frame. It sounded really good. I like the exhaust. It's not too overbearing on it, which I didn't want because I actually do want to take trips in this thing and not just be kind of a show car. But I know the first part of this episode may have been a little boring with me just doing the engine oil and everything like that. So I tried to cut out a lot of that. Hopefully you don't get too bored for that and you actually made it to the end. But if you did, thanks for watching, guys. If you like this type of content, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, share, leave me a comment. I try to reply to all those if I can, and I'll see y'all next time.